May I come in, sir?
Come in.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Have your seat, Saksham.
Thank you, sir.
Hopefully you've taken your vaccines.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so remove your mask.
Thank you, sir.
Comfortable?
Yes, sir.
Okay, tell us something about you.
So my name is Saksham Goel. I've graduated in BA program from St. Stephen's College. And from then on, I have been preparing for civil services examination. I've done a course from Harvard University in Principles of Economics. And I ranked 1 in my college.
Which college? It is Stephens or Harvard?
St. Stephen's College.
Okay. So in Stephens, you primarily studied political science or economics? More focus?
So both had equal focus.
Equal focus. And then you pursued principles of economics from Harvard?
Yes, during my college days itself.
Okay, so which principles you have studied from?
So the program was designed to cover 3 areas. One was the traditional microeconomics, one was the traditional macroeconomics, but the most focus was given on behavioral economics and the frontier research being done there.
Okay, so within behavioral economics, which areas you have studied? And can you utilize it to explain the behavior of Indian consumers, producers, traders, etc.?
So behavioral economics, in behavioral economics, there were 2 areas in which I prefer to read on. One was on political economy and behavioral economics. For instance, the impact of various policies on the politics of the country. And second was on discounting functions, which is how we discount psychologically various decisions that we make. As far as policy is concerned, 2 areas that are of interest to me. One is universal basic income and its impacts behaviorally. And second is on health, particularly how information can be disseminated for better policy making.
Are you interested in ancient economic ideas also? Ancient economic ideas?
No, sir, I haven't read much on that.
I think you've studied about the role of market in promotion of both production and consumption.
Yes, sir.
So, can you visualize how the market for religious services was utilized in the ancient time, and there has been a tradition since then, and which is working as a growth engine today in India?
So there are 2 aspects to it. As far as the market is concerned, one is the idea of spiritual economy, which is an idea which is associated with the bhakti culture. But even more strongly, temples in India have been areas of commerce as well, whereby markets near the temples, temples were places where markets would be there, where trade would be there, and social interactions were also there.
For example, the Indians in ancient time believed that there are 12 auspicious Jyotirlingas, and these are 12 places where these are placed. And these 12 places have become huge center of economic activity today. Crores of consumers in economic terms, and in spiritual terms, bhakts, devotees. But crores of consumers visit these 12 lingas every year, and that creates job for lakhs of people, and that adds to the GDP also. Similarly, there is another story that wife of Shiva committed suicide, and he danced with a dead body, and the body parts are spread over 51 places or 52 places, and these 52 places include Vaishno Devi and Kamakhya temple, and these are today huge trade centers or tourist centers. So can you anticipate that how this kind of religious stories or ideas were utilized for marketing of economic products in ancient time, and today these are very many small centers of growth which have saved the Indian economy from global recession?
Yes, sir. I think that these various places having religious significances have had a very important role in Indian economy. For instance, tourism. Religious tourism is very important in India. Recently, there was an interview of the present Deputy Chief Minister of Delhi who said that in India, instead of going to places where there is entertainment, the preferred mode of tourism is religious tourism, and that is a place where the Indian policy making should also go. So that is a very important part.
So, and is being a student of political science, do you further extend it that how this religious tourism is affecting the political structure and political climate of the country and reflecting in electoral politics?
So I think it has a very important role in communal harmony as well. In Meerut, there's a fair that happens, which is held exactly in between a temple and a masjid. And that is the reason, the symbol there is very strong. That is of communal harmony. So that is also something that can be seen.
Okay, nice, Saksham. Thank you,
sir.
Saksham, you are from Uttar Pradesh.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, tell me, should UP be divided into smaller states to bring better administration and to resolve the law and order situation?
Ma'am, there are these arguments about administrative convenience, about better implementation of policies. But I think that no research study has shown that smaller states have better governance. It will lead to more infrastructural burden on the state. And culturally, I think Uttar Pradesh is one state. So I think Uttar Pradesh should remain one state, although as far as the seats of governance are concerned, for instance, the High Court is concerned, we can have more seats of these places.
Okay. So recently there is a trend where bureaucrats are joining political parties. They leave either after retirement or they quit their job and join them and fight for elections. So as a student of PSIR, analyze this for me.
As a student of political science,
yes,
I would say that internationally, political parties in the West have had people who have been experts in their field appointed as ministers or secretaries in the case of the United States. For instance, the present United States Secretary of Treasury, Secretary Yellen, was also the Federal Reserve chairwoman during Obama administration. Therefore, having experts in and people of experience in the party for more informed policy making, which informs the party, is a good move.
Okay, but civil servants are mostly generalists.
Ma'am, civil servants to my mind are generalists, but within the bureaucracy, they become specialists on policy making in their own particular fields and have the experience which they can share with the parties.
So, suggest me 5 non-fiction books that I should be reading.
Number 1 would be Indira Gandhi by Inder Malhotra. Number 2 would be Jugalbandi by Vinay Sitapati.
Okay.
Number 3 would be In Service of My Nation by B.D. Pandey. Number 4, The Idea of India by Sunil Khilnani. And number 5, the 3 books by Pranab Mukherjee, the former president of India.
Tell me, why have you focused on 1970s? What is so peculiar? Why are you so interested in that period?
Ma'am, because the emergency has a direct bearing on my generation. The 2 events to my mind which have a direct bearing today are the 1975-77 emergency and the 1990s economic reforms. 1990s economic reforms is something that I was aware of growing up, but the impact of the emergency I was not.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Saksham.
Thank you, ma'am.
Saksham, like taking it from there, like you are interested in India's contemporary history, like since 1970s.
Yes.
So one of the Indian Prime Minister who was very famous, he said that even not taking a decision is a decision. Can you tell me the name of the Prime Minister?
So can I guess?
Yes.
So P.V. Narasimha Rao.
You are right. And do you agree with this, his statement that even no decision is a decision?
Yes, sir, I do. An act of omission is also an act of commission.
Okay. And if we link it to India's stand on Ukraine crisis, so what we are seeing is that India has done repeated abstentions in UN votes. So do you think being neutral in a war which is basically which is causing a lot of human misery, is that right on part of India, morally right?
So I think that although we have abstained, we are not neutral. If we look at the explanation of our vote in the UN Security Council, we have asked for dialogue, we have asked for cessation of violence. But when it comes to our national interest, that is also important. Therefore, we have walked a very tight rope successfully between our principles of democracy and our national interest.
So what if we replace Ukraine by India and Russia by China? And then do you think this thing would be welcome, such a stand on the part of other countries?
So number one, I think India is a very powerful and very influential country in the world. So that situation I don't think can happen. Number two, even if it happens, the Western countries as well as the third world, as well as the countries within the sphere of influence of Russia, all of them support us because of our diplomatic stances. So I don't see that happening.
Okay. So for a weaker country, it is all right to be attacked by a much powerful country.
So although there are realists like Mearsheimer who would say that that is the reality, but I disagree. Smaller countries with sovereignty cannot be attacked, and that is why Indian stance is about cessation of violence and dialogue.
Okay. And again, another statement is there which basically says that the US has done the right thing in the wrong manner as far as Afghanistan is concerned. How much do you agree or disagree with this statement?
So I think that US had to leave Afghanistan at some point in time. Their goals of war were unclear from the very beginning. They were earlier for preventing terrorism, then they were there for nation building, and then they were there because of no reason at all. Therefore, leaving was the right decision. But the way it was done, without real protection to the women in Afghanistan, without real guarantee of Taliban being a liberal Taliban, was unwelcome, and that could have been avoided.
Saksham, we are seeing that the entire world is facing a water crisis. In fact, India is at the forefront of that. So, what should be the policy that should be applied in this case to deal with or managing the water crisis? Should we go for a model where more people pay for water, or should we go for the other alternative where some people pay more for the water? I hope you have understood the question. So which of these alternatives would you choose and why?
So to my mind, the first principle should be that water is a fundamental right. But at the same time, we must all be aware of the fact that water is in a crisis. Water problem is a reality. Interstate as well as between people. What can be done? Number one, awareness. How can it be done? Through education.
But you have to choose between two options that I have given. More people paying for water, or some people paying more for water?
So I would prefer the second. Some people paying more for water.
And why?
So because in India, water and good quality water is a problem even in every state, and therefore they won't be able to afford it.
My final question to you is we are at present having Web 2.0. But what is Web 3.0? How it will be different from Web 2.0?
So I'm unaware of it. I'll read up on
Thank you.
Saksham, how are you?
Great, sir.
You're feeling well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What are the 5 areas in which you are comfortable in regard to Constitution of India? 5 topics.
So number 1, the preamble. Number 2, the first article, the spirit of the first article. Second is, the third is fundamental rights. Fourth, directive principles. And fifth, fundamental duty.
Okay. Preamble, let's talk about preamble. Tell me one thing, recently one of the members of parliament have introduced the bill that seeks to amend the preambular values. Why after so many years preambular amendment has been there, amendment have been questioned, the words of like socialist has to be replaced with equitable. What is the need as such in this regard to amend the very principle of preamble, because it defines the very fundamental spirit and vision of the constitution makers?
So I think there are two large arguments for amending. Number one is the way that amendment of the 42nd Amendment was made. It was a parliament which had many opposition leaders in jail and emergency imposed. So that is a questionable part. Second is, although in spirit we are a welfarist society, but in practice socialism is not probably the right word that is being used. But to my mind, today socialism is representative of the welfare nature of India, and that is why I don't see that amendment to be a really necessary thing.
Since you are coming basically from Uttar Pradesh, I mean, Uttar Pradesh has been in news for a variety of reasons, you know that. Tell me one thing, but there were apprehensions regarding the conduct of elections. The questioning was primarily done by the people, mainly from the opposition parties. How do you see this? The questioning the credibility of electronic voting machine every now and then has become the new normal these days. Do you think that this poses a threat to the administrative authorities by and large?
So I think the most tangible way of seeing democracy work is elections, and the sanctity of the process of election is important. Having said that, there needs to be proof that there has been any tampering. For instance, the US elections of 2020, there were allegations which were unsubstantiated, and that is why I think if there is proof, then there must be a proper procedure, but otherwise.
Okay, that's all from my side.
Okay, Saksham. In your DAF, I see that you were writer for a child with special needs for the 12th boards exam. So how is it done? Like, you apply for it or you're selected for being the writer?
Ma'am, there is a request from the administration. Whoever applies for it can become a writer.
Okay. And is there a selection process?
No, ma'am, it is something that people usually don't do because the exams of the 11th standards are also going on.
Okay, so you did it out of the voluntary nature. Okay, when we talk about inclusive education, do you think people with special needs are included in that inclusive bracket? Give me your opinion in light of pandemic.
Ma'am, there are two ways I would see special needs during the pandemic. One is people with bodily disabilities, and second is people with financial requirements. As far as people with bodily disabilities are concerned, there I think the problem with visually impaired individuals would have been even greater, because the availability of braille laptops is a very, very expensive equipment. As far as people with underprivileged backgrounds are concerned, online education I think has a high initial cost, but with government schemes like provision of laptops, like radio classes, like television classes, that impact was relatively
and
lower.
This has been accessed by everybody from the lower socioeconomic strata, these things which government is provisioning. You think they have been reaching to the people who are in need?
Ma'am, in places like Delhi, there has been relatively good.
Recently, Cabinet has cleared the proposal for increasing the marriageable age for women. Previously, it was 18 years for women and 21 for men. Can you give me the reason why this 3 years gap was maintained? Why not bring men to 18 years, or rather going forward now we have raised it to 21 for women? Why was not it there before?
Ma'am, during the colonial times, there was initial resistance from within the community regarding having any minimum age. After that, with the age of consent bill, there was an acceptance of 14 and 18.
I'm talking about precisely this gap. Why have we maintained this gap, whether it's 14, 18 or 18 or 21? Why has there always been a gap with respect to gender?
Ma'am, I think there are, as far as the social perceptions are concerned, two prejudices. One is that women tend to mature earlier, and second is that the wife is supposed to be younger than men, and that stereotype was reflected in the laws.
Okay. And now you think that we are defeating that stereotype by raising the minimum age for women also?
Ma'am, I think it is a step in the right direction, but the law alone won't immediately defeat the prejudice.
Okay, thank you, Saksham.
Thank you, ma'am.
Saksham, what are the objectives of, or what is the objective of foreign trade policy announced last year?
So I cannot recall right now.
Have you gone through it?
So I had gone through the summary of it.
Okay, so what give us something about foreign trade policy. What are the provisions? Some new schemes?
So I cannot recall right now.
Okay, so you can't recall anything?
No,
Okay. Do you think this National Asset Monetization Program is a program in the right direction?
So there have been concerns that this is like selling the silver, but I think that since it is only about leasing and it will generate the revenue which is required for infrastructure-led growth, it is a step in the right direction.
Okay, so how much resource it has generated so far? Any update?
So I'm unable to recall the right number, but it has been below expectations.
And why this is so?
So because of COVID-induced lockdowns and subsequent recession, there is a dampened market, and that is why investments are down, and that is why leasing has been less.
Do you think this LIC privatization should be done? Is it? Because LIC is basically offering social security service, and people feel secure buying LIC policy because it is owned by the government. So there is a guarantee of the sovereign. But if that guarantee weakens, do you think that the product would continue to be as safe as it is?
So I think right now we are only disinvesting 5%. It's a minority sale. But as far as privatization of LIC is concerned, I don't think that that would be really productive, because A, people depend on it. B, insurance is a merit good. And C, even when the government or any department wants money, then the first place they look for is the LIC. So it should be within the government hands.
And how do you see this railway transport service? Is it a merit good or non-merit good?
So I think it is a merit good.
So should railway transport service be privatized?
So to my mind, eventually it can be privatized, but the contracts have to be such that these merit goods are provided by the private sector itself.
At affordable price necessarily? Or market determined price?
So I think that can be tackled by the contracts, and preferably at affordable prices in the remote regions of the country.
Okay, nice talking to you, Saksham. Your interview is over. You may go now.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Come, Saksham, have your seat.
Thank you.
So this is your very first attempt. You have reached interview stage.
Yes.
Congratulations, very good.
Thank you, sir.
And your interview is on 13th of April.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So there is lots of time. I think sufficient time. 15 days is not short time. It's good enough time. So how do you reflect upon your performance today?
So I think I made a blunder by naming a few people, P.N. Haksar and all of those. Otherwise, I will wait your feedback.
Okay. What else? Any other area?
So I don't know.
See, we are happy with your performance, and we are all expecting that you'll be scoring very good overall. But of course, there are certain areas which we have identified. Tie should be a little tightened further. That means is not properly placed.
So this is not what I'll be wearing then.
Okay,
It's being tailored.
Fine. So that day, I'll be a little put. Hair would be oiled or will carry this way?
So I'll cut them and.
Fine. So that part you'll take care. So overall, your entry is good. Sitting posture is good. There was some hand movement initially. It's better to keep it calm and stable. These are the areas I'm suggesting, because most of the analytical part is very good, very impressive. On political issue, we tried to brought you into a controversial domain, but you most of the time successfully maintained a neutral stand and displayed a depth of analysis. So whether it is economic issue or political issue or political economy issue or some socio-cultural issue linked to that. So on analytical part is very good. Your flow of communication is effective. You are conveying what you intended to convey. So because these areas are good, so we are focusing more on that other things should not remain weak. So appearance wise is good, your entry is good, sitting posture is good. Hand movement, you take care of it, watch your video. And on maybe a couple of occasions, you can make your answers to the point. For example, sir asked you about points, and in such question, if the member is asking you points 2 or 3, first mention those points, and if you feel like elaborating a particular point, elaborate it. What you did here, that you mentioned one point, started elaborating it, and forgot to mention the other point, which happens generally. So that will weaken your overall impact, which is very strong. Right. So a little bit careful on those occasions. And because you have studied from Stephens, expectation level is higher, and economics you have done from Harvard also, so you are expected to be aware about current developments, policy decisions. So read all these things, foreign trade policy. There is a recent special economic agreement, that is free trade agreement with the UAE. This current development, I think, be aware of. You've got 15 days, that's good enough time. That's a matter of 2-3 days of effort. Assemble those informations, do it. And other things are very good, very impressive. I don't think there is much to change. Yes, you continue to perform this way and confidently go and display. That's best of luck.
Yes.
Any questions from your side?
Sir, just one question. When I mentioned the Deputy Chief Minister's interview, was it out of line or was it acceptable?
See, if that strengthens the point you are trying to convey, that's good. But there in the book, try to make it as precise as possible. In case of particularly politicians, don't introduce unnecessary variables in the discourse. The more variables you introduce, the more diversity in the question emerging. Okay, best of luck.
Thank you. Yes.